U.S. president back on his way home, wrapping up a three-country tour of Asia, and he's returning with a trade deal between the U.S. and China. His final act was meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping as the world's largest economies appear to have finally settled a bitter trade war. The agreements included a plan to lower some of the tariffs on China over fentanyl. They also seem to strike a deal for China to buy more soybean products from the U.S.
We're in agreement on so many elements, large amounts, tremendous amounts of the soybeans and other farm products are going to be purchased immediately, starting immediately. I put a 20% tariff on China because of the fentanyl coming in, which is a big tariff. And based on his statements today, I reduced it by 10%, so it's 10% instead of 20%. Effective immediately. I guess on the scale of from 0 to 10, with 10 being the best, I would say the meeting was at 12.
The president says he's going back to China in April. Joining me now to discuss is Will Ripley, CNN's senior international correspondent. Obviously, we just heard from the president on Air Force One there saying he has a deal. What more are you learning about what's been agreed to and what kind of difference it'll make in the kind of tariff structure as it is right now?
Yeah, it was certainly a whirlwind from the time President Trump wrapped that meeting to Xi Jinping. They raced essentially to the airport, got on Air Force One, took off, and then the audio of that gaggle with reporters started coming out, and it was all of these major headline-making announcements that the trade war may be over, that they may have finalized a deal. You heard the president talking about the soybeans. You heard the president talking about tariffs. And the most contentious issue, rare earths. China basically controls the mining and processing of these components that are used to produce the semiconductors that power all of our most advanced tech around the world, and China's had these export controls on rare earths. President Trump said that issue has been resolved, and within hours of that, China's Commerce Ministry also put out a statement saying that they will be loosening up the export controls that they put in place as a direct result, they say, to U.S. actions in this trade war. Here's more of what President Trump said on Air Force One.
I think pretty soon we have not too many major stumbling blocks. We have a deal. Now, every year we'll renegotiate the deal, but I think the deal will go on for a long time, long beyond the year. We'll negotiate at the end of the year, but all of the rare earth has been settled. There's no roadblock at all on rare earth. That will hopefully disappear from our vocabulary for a little while.
Now, obviously, as you know, the devil's in the details, and there's probably still a lot that needs to be put down on paper. The black and white, the documents, that all needs to be reviewed. President Trump saying that he may be traveling to Beijing in April, which would give teams on both sides, both in Washington and Beijing, about 6 months to get the details of this sorted out. But it does seem to be welcome news, at least on the surface, based on the headlines that President Trump has been making with his statements and the bits of information that are trickling out of China. But we need to follow through and see how this actually all shakes out. But it is for just over 24 hours on the ground here in South Korea. Certainly a lot of movement made, not just on trade with China, but also trade here in South Korea. Audi, President Trump saying that he has finalized the framework of a deal with the South Koreans as well. So a lot of progress made on the ground here. We'll see if it all sorts out in the end.
And CNN's Will Ripley, thank you so much.
I think we've already agreed to a lot of things, and we'll agree to some more right now. But President Xi is a great leader of a great country, and I think we're going to have a fantastic relationship for a long period of time.
Given our different national conditions, we do not always see eye to eye with each other. And it is normal for the two leading economies of the world to have frictions now and then.
Now it seems some of those frictions have been eased. On Air Force One, President Trump announced a deal to lower tariffs on China over fentanyl. China also agreed to lift export controls on rare earth minerals at least for 1 year, while also agreeing to resume purchasing U.S. soybean products. Historically, China's been the #1 buyer of those exports, and this year didn't buy any. Joining the group chat now to talk about this, David Sanger, CNN political and national security analyst. He's also the national security correspondent for the New York Times. Welcome to the chat, David.
Good to be with you.
We're bringing you in because you've been doing a lot of writing about this, and I want to start with the deal, because there's the top line and then there's like what actually was accomplished. Other than this deal for soybean farmers who were upset, what was actually accomplished here?
You know, I think the best way to think about this, Audie, was that the president's won another ceasefire. He created a crisis by putting in the tariffs. The Chinese responded by cutting off rare earths, ceasing the purchase of American soybeans, which they knew would create huge political pressure. He's basically reset the clock to January. But the remarkable thing about this was what wasn't in their announcements. When you think about what we've just heard in the past few hours, and this is the first time these two have met in 6 years. You know, obviously COVID got in the way of a good bit of that. China's got the fastest growing nuclear capability. It's got technological competition with us in artificial intelligence and semiconductors. There's the TikTok issue. There's Taiwan. We heard about none of that.
Yeah, which, by the way, TikTok, just because there's a lot of creators out there watching this, who's going to control the algorithm if a sale goes through?
Well, the U.S. in its previous discussions, you know, a few weeks ago, said that over time the U.S. would create its own algorithm based on the TikTok model. But we were expecting this deal to be sort of closed and the details of how that would work to be announced. It didn't happen.
I have to ask Mike, I think you were saying that this was kind of the whole enchilada, like that this Asia trip was sort of, well, you might have said egg roll, but I think that...
Audie, you're putting a lot of words in my mouth this morning.
Listen, we take notes on this show, okay?
I may not send you notes anymore.
But do you see what has been accomplished, rather than kind of what David is outlining here, how much wasn't?
Well, look, I think a couple things that we didn't talk about have been accomplished. The trade deals with Japan and South Korea, and then the peace deal between Cambodia and Thailand, which were, I mean, basically, I think all victories for President Trump on that front. The one place with David that I might take exception, and this is really on the tariffs. Yes, we have ratcheted down the fentanyl tariffs from 20 to 10%, but we still have an average, I think it's 45% tariffs on China.
That's right.
Before Trump came in, and when you say it was reset to January, before he came in, it was like 2.7%.
Yeah.
So we still have this, can be described as a very extreme tariff regime with China. China imposes 35% tariffs on us. So I guess we're winning that war, but there still is a lot more to go.
And your scare quotes are doing a lot of work that David was saying, which is that this is a problem of his own making. Like, this is not where we are is in part because of the president's own tariff regime.
Yeah, it's money.
That's right. I'm not suggesting that any of that is small or, not critical to the relationship. What I am saying is, isn't it astounding that they met for only an hour and 40 minutes when we're talking about the world's two largest economies, two biggest technological competitors? I mean, even with the failed meeting with Putin, it went on for 3 hours before they left lunch on the table and walked out the door. So, when I think about the last big meeting that Xi Jinping had with Joe Biden, which was in San Francisco on the edges of another summit, they basically kept at it all day.
Yeah.
And the fact that they did not have enough prepared here to be able to go do that, I think, is telling.
It's telling. It's also telling about the relationship and Trump's ability to draw China into his usual diplomatic theatrics.